What if the least energy efficient part of surviving winter isn't your heating system? What if it's the fact that you forgot 12 things your great grandmother knew by age 12? Plains homesteaders built homes that held heat without electricity, stored food without refrigeration, and read the weather without an app. Every one of those skills still works. Some of them work better than what replaced them. This video is going through all 12 because the physics behind them hasn't changed and neither has the weather. Number 1. Building sod houses for insulation against heat and cold. In the 1870s, a Kansas family broke sod with a spade and stacked the cuts into walls 2 feet thick because there was no lumber yard within 80 miles and winter didn't care about that problem. Those walls kept them alive through cold that killed cattle standing in open fields. Number 2. Planting windbreaks of trees around homesteads. Before your grandfather drove a single nail, if he knew what he was doing, he planted trees. Specifically on the north and west sides of the property, because plains wind doesn't just feel cold, it pulls heat off every surface it touches, and no fire inside keeps up with that. Most suburban zoning codes now restrict how close to a property line you can plant, and HOA rules in newer developments ban the dense mixed species rows that make a windbreak actually work. Your grandfather's trees are still cutting the wind if nobody took a chainsaw to them. Number 3. Digging storm cellars for tornado protection. On May 27, 1896, a tornado tore through St. Louis and killed more than 250 people. The rural families who survived outside the city didn't survive because they had better luck. They'd already dug a hole in the ground and covered it with a wooden door. And that hole is the entire engineering principle behind the storm cellar. A tornado's destructive force operates almost entirely above grade. The pressure, the debris, the structural loading on walls and roofs, all of it happens in the air above ground level. So a space that sits below grade is simply outside the zone where the damage occurs, in a way no above ground room can fully match. Number 4. Collecting rainwater during wet seasons. A Plains family in a wet spring set a barrel under the roof edge and let the rain do the work. Pitched roof, a simple gutter, the barrel, and a piece of cheesecloth to catch debris. That's the whole system. It cost almost nothing to build and nothing at all to run. Rainwater is naturally soft, meaning it carries almost no minerals, so it's actually better for washing, cooking, and garden use than the hard municipal water most Plains households now pay for by the gallon. Number 5. Storing food in root cellars to survive harsh winters. 6 feet down, the ground holds between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round across most of the country, and Plains homesteaders knew this the way they knew where the sun rose. So they dug into it and built a room there, and that room kept food alive through both July and January without a single moving part. A root cellar isn't refrigeration. It's something more precise. It holds food in the exact temperature and humidity range, where biological decay slows down but doesn't stop, which is different from freezing. And it's the range that most vegetables and cured meats actually need. Number 6. Keeping extra firewood stockpiled year-round. A Plains homesteader in 1890 who ran out of firewood in February didn't call anyone. There was no one to call, and the temperature inside dropped to killing levels fast, so they didn't run out because running out wasn't survivable. The stockpile wasn't just one winter's worth. It covered 2 minimum because a wet summer could prevent cutting, a bad harvest year could eat your labor, and a long cold season could burn through your reserves before March. They also knew their wood by species. Oak and hickory run 24 to 28 million BTUs per cord. Cottonwood, often the only option on open plains, runs closer to 15 million. So you needed nearly twice as much of it. Number 7. Using thick curtains and shutters to block extreme temperatures. From October through March, your great-grandmother hung heavy wool or canvas over every window and exterior door. Not for decoration, but because a single-pane window in a 10-degree wind is functionally a hole in the wall. Glass conducts heat about 20 times faster than wood, and roughly 10,000 times faster than still air. So the goal isn't the fabric itself, it's the trapped air between the curtain and the cold glass. Plains families also put wooden shutters on the outside, adding a second air gap. And that combination performed close to what a modern double-pane window delivers. The window replacement industry runs about $15 billion a year on the energy efficiency argument. And that argument isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. A thermal-lined curtain hung tight to the wall, long enough to touch the floor, solves the same problem for about $40. Number 8. Building homes partially into hillsides for shelter from wind. Plains homesteaders who had a south-facing slope sometimes cut the back and sides of the house right into it, so 3 walls sat buried in earth. And that one decision changed everything about how the structure held heat. A buried wall can't lose heat to wind because there's no air moving against it. The Earth on the other side sits at 50 to 55 degrees year-round, so the temperature gap across that wall in January is maybe 15 degrees, not the 50 or 60 degrees hammering every above-grade wall on the property. The south face was the only wall left open, positioned directly toward the winter sun, which rides low across the southern sky on the plains and pushes heat straight through any window on that side. The hill killed the north wind. The sun worked the south wall. The earth handled everything else, and nobody sold them any of it. Number 9. Preserving food through canning, smoking, and drying. In the fall of 1910, a Plains farm wife with a good harvest fired up the wood stove, pulled out the glass jars, and ran a food preservation operation that would carry her family through 5 months of winter. 3 methods, each one attacking spoilage differently. Canning kills bacteria with heat and locks them out with a vacuum seal. Smoking pushes phenolic compounds from wood smoke into meat surfaces, cutting bacterial growth while drying the outer layer. Drying pulls out the moisture that bacteria, mold, and yeast need to do anything at all. This isn't folk wisdom, it's chemistry, and your grandmother ran it without a lab or a certification. Number 10. Watching cloud formations and animal behavior for weather warnings. A Plains farmer in 1880 who misread the weather and got caught in the open didn't get a second chance. No rescue was coming, so the ones who survived learned to read what the sky was already telling them. This sounds like folklore until you check the atmospheric science. When cattle bunch up on the south side of a pasture, they're responding to real drops in barometric pressure that they detect before any human does. Cirrus clouds thickening from the west over 12 to 24 hours mean a warm front is moving in. And on the plains in winter, a warm front often pulls a hard, cold snap right behind it. Number 11. Rotating crops to reduce drought damage and soil exhaustion. A Plains homesteader who planted the same crop in the same field every year was broke by year 5. The ones who passed land to their children rotated legumes through every field on a 2 to 3 year cycle, and those legumes, beans, peas, clover, host nitrogen-fixing bacteria in root nodules that release free nitrogen into the soil when you plow them under. That's the same nutrient synthetic fertilizer delivers today at $500 to $800 per ton. The Dust Bowl wasn't just a drought. It was a drought hitting land stripped of root diversity by continuous monoculture wheat farming, and the families who'd kept rotating held soil the wind couldn't move. Number 12. Keeping emergency livestock feed reserves for severe winters and droughts. Cold doesn't just freeze cattle, it burns through them. A cow needing 25 pounds of hay on a normal winter day can need 35 to 40 pounds when temperatures drop hard and stay there. So a rancher who calculated feed based on an average winter ran out before the snow melted. The math your great-grandfather used wasn't complicated. Count your animals. Estimate your worst likely winter based on what the worst recent winters actually looked like. Calculate the caloric density of what's in the barn, then add a buffer on top of that worst case. The ranchers who survived 1886 had built that buffer. The ones who hadn't were selling land by April. Pattern break. Not one skill on this list got replaced because something better came along. Every single one got replaced because something more profitable came along, and that's the whole story of what happened to American self-reliance between 1900 and 1970. The sod house didn't fail. Lumber companies needed customers. The root cellar didn't stop working. Appliance manufacturers needed your monthly electricity bill. This is called regulatory capture, where the agency meant to regulate an industry ends up controlled by it. And the lobbying records of the National Association of Home Builders and the American Farm Bureau are public documents. Read them yourself.